Don't come to the wedding. Just watch it on YouTube if you care so much, Mom. I stared at the text message on my phone, reading it 3 times before the words actually sank in. My son Trevor had just uninvited me from his own wedding, the same wedding I had been funding entirely for the past 8 months. I sat in my corner office at Gravora Group, the pharmaceutical company I had built from nothing, and felt something cold settle in my chest. My name is Karen Whitlow. I'm 58 years old, and I've spent the last 30 years learning that people will take everything you give them and still find a way to ask for more. But this crossed a line I never thought my own child would dare to cross. I set my phone down carefully on my mahogany desk and looked out at the Seattle skyline. Rain streaked down the windows, which seemed fitting. Just yesterday, I had approved the final payment of $45,000 for the flowers alone. The venue in Tuscany, the 5-course dinner for 200 guests, the imported champagne, the designer everything. It all added up to nearly $300,000. Money I had transferred without hesitation because I thought I was investing in my son's happiness. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had built a business empire worth $50 million. Yet somehow I had raised a son who felt entitled to exclude me from the most important day of his life, while still expecting me to pay for every expensive detail. The wedding was set for this Saturday in a historic villa outside Florence. I was supposed to fly out tomorrow morning. Trevor's fiancée Cassandra had always made it clear she thought I was too involved in their lives. Too controlling, she called it. What she failed to understand was that when you write the checks, you earn the right to have opinions. But apparently, my financial contributions weren't enough to secure me a seat at my own son's wedding. I picked up my phone again and typed back a simple response. Have a wonderful time, sweetie. Then I opened my contacts and scrolled to my assistant's number. Patricia had been with me for 12 years and understood the subtle language of my business dealings better than most lawyers. I typed out a message that would change everything. Call it off. The moment I hit send, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about a wedding anymore. This was about respect, boundaries, and teaching my ungrateful son that actions have consequences. He wanted to exclude me? Fine. But he could do it without my money. I had always known Trevor was spoiled, but I blamed myself for that. After his father died when Trevor was 12, I threw myself into work and tried to compensate for his loss with material things. Private schools, luxury vacations, a trust fund that would set him up for life. I gave him everything I never had growing up poor in Detroit. The red flag started appearing about 2 years ago when Trevor announced his engagement to Cassandra Fleming, a wannabe influencer from a wealthy Boston family. From our first meeting, she made snide comments about my new money status and how different our families were. She had this way of smiling while delivering insults that made my teeth ache. "Oh, Karen, how quaint that you still work so much at your age," she had said during their engagement party. My mother retired at 55 to focus on her charity work and art collection. I should have seen then how she was poisoning Trevor against me. The weekly dinners became monthly, then stopped altogether. Phone calls became texts, and texts became silence unless he needed something. The wedding planning had been my last attempt to bridge the gap between us. When they first told me about their dream of a destination wedding in Italy, I immediately offered to pay. Trevor's eyes lit up with that familiar gleam I recognized from his childhood, the look of someone who had just gotten exactly what they wanted. But Cassandra's expression was different. She looked almost disappointed that I had made the gesture before she could manipulate it out of me. Over the following months, every conversation about the wedding became a negotiation. Cassandra wanted the most expensive everything, and somehow I became the villain for asking reasonable questions about the budget. When I suggested we could have an equally beautiful ceremony in Napa Valley for half the cost, she accused me of trying to ruin their special day. "This is our dream wedding, Mom," Trevor had said, his voice carrying that whining tone I remembered from when he was 15. "Can't you just support us without trying to control everything?" The worst part was watching my son transform into someone I barely recognized. The boy who used to call me every Sunday had become a stranger who only contacted me when he needed another wire transfer. Cassandra had successfully turned me from his mother into his ATM, and I had let it happen because I was desperate to maintain some connection with my only child. Now, sitting in my office with rain pattering against the windows, I realized that connection had been an illusion. They had been planning to exclude me all along, probably figuring I would find out too late to do anything about it. They had underestimated me completely. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Understood. How far do we take this? I smiled for the first time in weeks and typed back, all the way. The next morning brought a flurry of activity that felt oddly therapeutic. Patricia arrived at my office at 6 a.m. with a stack of contracts and a grim expression that told me she was ready for war. We had worked together long enough that she understood my methods. I never made empty threats, and I always followed through. The venue contract has a 48-hour cancellation clause with full refund, she reported, spreading documents across my conference table. The caterer can be canceled with 24 hours notice. The florist, photographer, and string quartet all have similar terms. Your legal team has been reviewing everything since last night. I nodded, feeling that familiar rush of satisfaction that came from thorough preparation. In business, timing was everything, and I had always been excellent at timing. What about the guests? Do we have the invitation list? Cassandra's assistant was very helpful when I explained we needed to coordinate travel arrangements, Patricia said with a slight smirk. Apparently most guests are staying at the same hotel in Florence. I have all the details. The beauty of my plan was its simplicity. Everything, and I mean everything, had been booked under my company's name using my credit cards. Trevor and Cassandra had been so eager to spend my money that they had never bothered to transfer any vendors to their own accounts. They had no legal standing, no financial responsibility, and no backup plan. My phone rang, displaying Trevor's number. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message. Hey, Mom. Just wanted to confirm everything is still on track for Saturday. Cassie is getting nervous about some of the vendors. Call me back when you get this. The audacity was breathtaking. 3 days after uninviting me, he was calling to make sure I was still handling all the logistics for his wedding. I deleted the message without responding. Patricia looked up from her laptop. The hotel confirms that Mr. Trevor Whitlow and Miss Cassandra Fleming checked in yesterday evening. Their rehearsal dinner is scheduled for tonight at the venue. Perfect timing, I said, feeling pieces click into place. Execute the cancellations in sequence. Start with the vendors, then the venue. I want everything gone by noon their time. As Patricia made the calls, I booked a flight to Florence. If my son wanted me to watch his wedding online, he was going to be disappointed. There wouldn't be a wedding to watch, but there would be something much better. A lesson in consequences that would be worth every penny I had ever spent on his entitled existence. The last call Patricia made was to the villa. I watched her face as she spoke with the event coordinator, explaining that the Whitlow wedding was canceled effective immediately due to a family emergency. When she hung up, she looked at me with something approaching admiration. It's done, she said. Everything's canceled. Do you want me to book the return of the deposits? Not yet, I replied, already planning my next move. I have a better idea. The flight to Florence gave me 12 hours to perfect my plan. While Trevor and Cassandra were probably enjoying their rehearsal dinner, blissfully unaware that their wedding was evaporating around them, I was 30,000 feet above the Atlantic, putting the finishing touches on what would become the most satisfying business transaction of my career. I had built Gravora Group by recognizing opportunities that others missed, and this situation was no different. The Villa Monterosa was exquisite, a 16th century estate with terraced gardens, a chapel, and accommodations for 50 guests. I had chosen it myself after touring dozens of venues. It was exactly the kind of place where a successful pharmaceutical CEO might host an important corporate retreat. My assistant had done her homework. The villa's event coordinator, Signora Benedetti, was devastated about the cancellation. but thrilled when I called to book the same weekend for a last-minute executive summit. The deposit I offered was twice what Trevor's wedding would have paid, and I promised a full week of additional bookings for future company events. "Naturalmente, Signora Whitlow," she had said in accented English. "The villa is yours. We will make it perfetto for your important guests." What she didn't know was that my important guests were the same people who had been invited to my son's wedding. During the flight, I had spent 4 hours crafting the perfect email, which went out to every single person on Cassandra's invitation list. "Dear friends and family," it began, "due to unforeseen circumstances, Trevor and Cassandra's wedding has been postponed indefinitely. However, I, Karen Whitlow, would be honored to host you all for a weekend celebration of new beginnings at the Villa Monterosa. Please consider this my treat as a gesture of gratitude for your friendship and support over the years." The responses started coming in before I landed. Apparently, many of the guests had been looking forward to their Italian weekend more than the actual wedding. Cassandra's own grandmother replied that she was delighted to finally meet the woman who built such an impressive company and looked forward to proper conversation with someone who understood business. By the time I checked into my hotel in Florence, a different one from where Trevor and Cassandra were staying, I had 43 confirmed attendees for my impromptu celebration. The florist was thrilled to repurpose the elaborate arrangements. The caterer switched the menu from wedding breakfast to corporate luncheon without missing a beat. Even the string quartet was available, eager for the additional income. The only thing I changed was the photography. Instead of wedding pictures, I arranged for a professional videographer to document my weekend celebration. After all, Trevor had suggested I watch on YouTube. I wanted to make sure he had something worth watching. My phone had been buzzing constantly with calls from Trevor, but I had turned it to silent mode. I could see his increasingly frantic voicemails piling up, but I wasn't ready to speak with him yet. First, I wanted him to fully understand what he had lost. The hotel concierge handed me my room key with a warm smile. "Benvenuta a Firenze, Signora Whitlow. I understand you have a special event this weekend." "Yes," I said, feeling genuinely happy for the first time in months. "It's going to be quite a celebration." As I rode the elevator to my suite, I thought about Trevor's text message that had started this whole thing. He had wanted me to watch his wedding online, as if my love for him could be reduced to a passive viewing experience. What he was about to learn was that some lines, once crossed, could never be uncrossed. And some mothers, when pushed too far, would rewrite the entire script. Saturday morning dawned crisp and clear in Tuscany. I woke up in my hotel suite feeling more energized than I had in years, like a general preparing for a battle I knew I would win. My phone showed 37 missed calls from Trevor and 12 text messages that progressed from confusion to panic to pure desperation. The first one, sent at 11 p.m. Florence time, read, "Mom, something weird is happening. The venue says our wedding is canceled. This has to be a mistake. Call me ASAP." By 3 a.m., his messages had become increasingly frantic. "Mom, where are you? The florist won't answer their phone. The caterer says they're working a different event. What is happening?" The most recent message, sent just an hour ago, simply said, "Please, I'm begging you. Call me back." I set the phone aside and ordered room service, fresh pastries, Italian coffee, and fruit that tasted like sunshine. Today was going to be perfect, and I intended to savor every moment of it. At 10 a.m., I arrived at Villa Monterosa to find organized chaos. The staff was setting up for what they believed was a corporate retreat, but with all the wedding flowers and decorations, it looked more like a fairy tale than a business meeting. Signora Benedetti greeted me with enthusiasm that bordered on reverence. "Signora Whitlow, everything is ready for your special guests. The chapel is prepared for your presentation." I had told her I would be giving a keynote speech about new beginnings in business. It wasn't entirely a lie. Yes, I'll be speaking about the importance of loyalty and respect in professional relationships. The first guests arrived at noon, Cassandra's Boston relatives who had been confused by my email but decided to attend anyway. Her Aunt Margaret, a stern-faced woman in her 70s, introduced herself with barely concealed curiosity. "I must say, this is highly unusual," she said, looking around at the elaborate setup. Cassandra never mentioned that Trevor's mother was so involved in the wedding planning. "Oh, I was very involved," I replied with a smile that felt sharp around the edges. "Some might say I made the whole thing possible." More guests trickled in throughout the afternoon. College friends of Trevor's, business associates of mine who had been invited as a courtesy, distant relatives who seemed more interested in the free Italian vacation than family obligations. By 4 p.m., we had a full house, and the irony was delicious. My son's wedding guests were attending my celebration instead. The photographer I had hired was documenting everything beautifully. Candid shots of guests enjoying the gardens, formal portraits in the chapel, group photos on the terrace with the Tuscan hills as a backdrop. It would make for quite a YouTube video. At 5 p.m., just as I was preparing to give my speech, my phone rang with a call from the hotel where Trevor and Cassandra were staying. I let it go to voicemail, then listened as the manager explained that Mr. Whitlow was in the lobby, asking to speak with me urgently. I turned to Signora Benedetti. "If anyone comes to the villa asking for Karen Whitlow, please tell them I'm unavailable. This is a private corporate event." She nodded solemnly. "Of course, Signora. No interruptions." As the golden hour approached and my guests gathered in the chapel for my presentation, I felt a satisfaction deeper than any business success I had ever achieved. Trevor had wanted to exclude me from his special day. Instead, I had created my own special day, with his guests, at his venue, telling the story I wanted to tell. The chapel at Villa Monterosa had never looked more beautiful. Late afternoon sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the stone floor where 43 wedding guests sat in wooden pews, waiting to hear what I had to say. The irony of the moment wasn't lost on me. I was standing exactly where my son should have been exchanging vows, addressing the people who had come to celebrate his marriage. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice carrying easily through the sacred space. "Thank you for joining me on such short notice for this celebration of new beginnings." I looked out at the faces before me, Cassandra's family, Trevor's college friends, business associates who had known me for years. Some looked confused, others curious, but all were listening intently. "Many of you traveled a long way to be here this weekend, expecting to witness a wedding. Instead, you're witnessing something far more valuable, a lesson about respect, loyalty, and the true meaning of family." Cassandra's grandmother leaned forward, her sharp eyes fixed on me with what looked like approval. Trevor's former roommate shifted uncomfortably in his seat, probably realizing he was about to hear some uncomfortable truths. "For 30 years, I built my company on the principle that relationships are investments. You give your time, your energy, your resources, and in return, you expect basic human decency. When people violate that trust, there are consequences." My phone, set to silent, lit up with another call from Trevor. I let it ring. "Some of you may be wondering why you received an invitation to my corporate celebration instead of attending the wedding you expected. The answer is simple. There is no wedding. Not today, not here, not funded by me." A murmur rippled through the chapel. I could see the realization dawning on their faces as they understood what had happened. 3 days ago, my son sent me a text message uninviting me from his wedding, the same wedding I had paid for entirely. He suggested I watch it on YouTube if I cared so much. What he didn't understand is that caring and enabling are not the same thing. The weight of their attention was intoxicating. These people had come here expecting to see Trevor marry Cassandra. Instead, they were witnessing the most public and thorough dismantling of entitlement I had ever orchestrated. Today, you're my guests at a celebration of something far more important than a wedding built on disrespect. Today, we're celebrating the power of consequences. I paused, letting the words sink in. Through the chapel windows, I could see the photographer capturing everything, just as I had planned. The flowers you see, the dinner you'll enjoy, the music you'll hear. All of it was meant for a young couple who forgot that respect cannot be bought, only earned. They wanted my money without my presence. They got neither. The silence in the chapel was complete now. Even the birds outside seemed to have stopped singing. But you, his friends, her family, the people who cared enough to travel across an ocean for what you thought was a celebration of love, you deserve better. You deserve a weekend that honors your time and acknowledges your worth. I gestured toward the doors. So let's go celebrate properly. Let's have the party they never deserved, and let's toast to the importance of treating the people who love us with the respect they've earned. As my guests filed out of the chapel, chattering excitedly among themselves, I felt my phone vibrate with yet another call. This time I answered. "Hello, Trevor." "Mom, what the hell have you done?" Trevor's voice was raw with panic and rage. I could hear Cassandra sobbing in the background, her cries echoing through what I assumed was their hotel room. "Language, sweetheart," I said calmly, stepping out onto the villa's terrace where my guests were gathering for cocktails. The view of the Tuscan hills was spectacular in the late afternoon light. "I've done exactly what you asked me to do." "What I asked you to do? Are you insane? You've ruined everything." "No, darling. You ruined everything when you decided to exclude me from the wedding I was paying for. I simply made sure there was nothing left to exclude me from." The silence on his end was deafening. I could picture him standing there, probably still in his hotel bathrobe, finally understanding the full scope of what had happened. "You canceled our wedding," he said finally, his voice cracking like a 12-year-old's. "I canceled my funding for your wedding," I corrected. "There's a difference. You wanted to get married without me? You should have found a way to pay for it without me." Cassandra's voice cut through the phone, sharp and hysterical. "You vindictive witch. You've destroyed the most important day of our lives." I actually laughed. "The most important day of your lives was going to be built on my money while excluding me from participating. That's not a marriage celebration, sweetheart. That's theft with good catering." Through the terrace doors I could see the photographer setting up for group shots, while guests mingled with glasses of Prosecco. Cassandra's grandmother was deep in conversation with my business partner about pharmaceutical patents. Trevor's college friends were taking selfies with the elaborate floral arrangements that would have been his wedding decorations. "We're flying home," Trevor said, defeat heavy in his voice. "This is over." "Yes, it is," I agreed. "Your wedding is over. Your entitled attitude is over, and your access to my bank account is definitely over. But my celebration is just beginning." I hung up on my son and rejoined my guests, who were having the time of their lives. The photographer had captured the exact moment I ended the call, my serene smile against the backdrop of Tuscany, surrounded by people who had originally come to celebrate someone else's love story, but had instead become witnesses to my masterpiece of consequence. Dinner was extraordinary. The 5-course meal that would have been Trevor and Cassandra's wedding feast became a celebration of independence and self-respect. The imported champagne sparkled in crystal glasses as I gave impromptu speeches about building businesses, choosing loyalty over blood relations, and the importance of surrounding yourself with people who value your contributions. Cassandra's grandmother, who had introduced herself as Eleanor Fleming, pulled me aside during dessert. "My dear," she said, her voice carrying the authority of old Boston money, "I have to tell you something. Cassandra and I haven't spoken in 2 years because of her entitled behavior. When I received your invitation, I almost didn't come. But I'm so glad I did." She paused, sipping her wine thoughtfully. "That boy of yours has no idea what he lost today, and my granddaughter is going to learn a very expensive lesson about respect." The photographer approached us as we stood on the terrace, the villa glowing golden in the setting sun. "Signora Whitlow, would you like me to prepare the video for uploading? You mentioned something about YouTube?" I smiled, thinking of Trevor's original suggestion that I watch his wedding online. "Yes, please prepare it for upload. Make sure the title is clear. A Mother's Celebration of New Beginnings in Tuscany. I want excellent quality. This needs to be something worth watching." As the evening wound down and guests began returning to their hotels, I felt a deep satisfaction settle in my chest. Trevor had gotten exactly what he asked for, a mother who wasn't at his wedding. The only difference was that now there wasn't a wedding for anyone to attend. The aftermath of my Tuscan celebration rippled through both families with the force of a small earthquake. Trevor and Cassandra's relationship crumbled within 3 months. Unable to survive the humiliation and the crushing debt they suddenly faced when they tried to plan a replacement wedding without my financial backing. Cassandra moved back to Boston, where her family's money couldn't quite cover the lifestyle she had grown accustomed to on my dime. Trevor lost his apartment, his luxury car, and most of his friends, when he could no longer afford the expensive dinners and vacations that had defined his social circle. He was forced to take a real job for the first time in his adult life, working in customer service for a tech company that paid a fraction of what his trust fund had provided. The video of my celebration went viral, viewed over 2 million times, with comments praising me as a savage queen and Mother of the Year. Cassandra's social media influence evaporated overnight when the story broke, her follower count plummeting as people realized her luxurious lifestyle had been funded entirely by the mother-in-law she had spent years insulting. As I sit in my Seattle office now, 6 months later, watching the rain streak down my windows, just as it did on that day when everything changed, I feel no regret about the choice I made. Trevor calls occasionally, usually when he needs help with rent or groceries, but our conversations are different now, more honest, less entitled. Sometimes I think he might actually be learning what it means to earn something instead of simply expecting it. Building Gravora Group taught me that the most valuable lessons often come with the highest price tags, and some investments only pay dividends when you're brave enough to stop throwing good money after bad. My son wanted to exclude me from his life while keeping my wallet. Instead, he learned that love and money are not the same thing, and that a mother's generosity, once lost, is not easily regained.